Elena Martinez stood before the full-length mirror in her penthouse suite, her hands trembling as she adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding dress. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the marble floors of the luxurious hotel room. In just 3 hours, she would become Mrs. Alexander Blackwood, wife to one of the world's youngest billionaires. The ivory silk gown hugged her curves perfectly, its hand-sewn pearls catching the light with every breath she took. But Elena's attention wasn't focused on the expensive dress or the diamond tiara that would soon crown her dark hair. Her eyes were fixed on the pair of cream-colored designer shoes sitting innocently on the velvet cushion nearby. Those shoes held a secret that could destroy everything. Elena's best friend and maid of honor, Sophia, bustled around the room, making final preparations. Sophia had been Elena's closest friend since their college days at Stanford, where they had both studied business administration. Back then, they had shared dreams of success and independence, never imagining that Elena would one day marry into one of America's wealthiest families. "You look absolutely stunning," Sophia said, stepping back to admire Elena's appearance. "Alexander is the luckiest man alive." Elena forced a smile, her stomach churning with anxiety. "Thank you, Sophia. I can't believe this is really happening." Sophia's expression softened with understanding. "It's normal to be nervous on your wedding day. You're about to marry the love of your life and become part of one of the most powerful families in the country. Anyone would be overwhelmed." If only Sophia knew the truth, Elena thought bitterly. If only she knew that this fairy tale wedding was built on lies and deception. The story had begun 18 months earlier when Elena was working as a financial analyst at Meridian Investment Group in Manhattan. She had graduated with honors from Stanford and quickly established herself as one of the most promising young professionals in the firm. Her analytical mind and dedication to her work had earned her respect from colleagues and clients alike. Elena had grown up in a modest household in Queens, the daughter of a construction worker and a school teacher. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico when Elena was just 3 years old, working multiple jobs to provide for their family and give their daughter the education they never had. Elena's success in the financial world was the fulfillment of their American dream. Alexander Blackwood had entered her life like a force of nature. At 32, he was the CEO of Blackwood Industries, a multinational conglomerate with interests in real estate, technology, and renewable energy. His grandfather had built the company from nothing in the 1940s, and Alexander had inherited both the business empire and the family's reputation for ruthless efficiency. Their first meeting had been at a charity gala in the Hamptons. Elena had been there representing her firm, networking with potential clients, and trying to make connections that could advance her career. She had worn her best dress, a simple black cocktail dress that she had saved for months to afford, and felt completely out of place among the designer gowns and million-dollar jewelry. Alexander had appeared beside her at the bar, ordering 2 glasses of champagne without being asked. He was tall and imposing, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed professional facade. When he handed her the champagne and introduced himself, Elena had nearly dropped the glass. "You look like someone who doesn't belong here," he had said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Elena had bristled at the comment, her pride flaring. "Excuse me. I meant that as a compliment," Alexander had replied smoothly. "Everyone else here is playing a role, putting on an act for the cameras and the society pages. You're the only person who looks genuine." That conversation had led to dinner the following week, then weekend trips to his estate in the Berkshires, then a whirlwind romance that had captured the attention of the media and high society. Elena had been thrust into a world of private jets, exclusive restaurants, and red carpet events. The shy girl from Queens had become the subject of countless magazine articles and social media posts. But fame came with a price, and Elena soon discovered that being Alexander Blackwood's girlfriend made her a target. The threats had started subtly. A few unpleasant comments on social media posts, some negative articles in gossip magazines questioning her background and motivations. Elena had tried to ignore them, focusing instead on her relationship with Alexander and her demanding career at Meridian. Then, the threats became more personal and more dangerous. It had been a cold Tuesday evening in November when Elena first noticed the black sedan following her home from work. She had dismissed it as paranoia until she saw the same car parked outside her apartment building the next morning. When she mentioned it to Alexander, he had immediately assigned her a security detail, explaining that wealthy families often attracted unwanted attention. The security team had discovered that Elena was being stalked by Marcus Chun, a disgraced former employee of Blackwood Industries who had been fired for embezzlement 3 years earlier. Marcus blamed Alexander for destroying his career and had apparently decided that Elena was the perfect target for revenge. The stalking had escalated over the following months. Marcus had somehow obtained Elena's personal information, including her work schedule, her favorite restaurants, and even her family's address in Queens. He had sent threatening letters to her office, made anonymous phone calls to her apartment, and once even broke into her car to leave a menacing note on her dashboard. The final straw had come 6 months ago when Marcus had cornered Elena in the parking garage beneath her office building. He had been waiting by her car, his face twisted with rage and desperation. Elena had never been so terrified in her life. "You think you're so special because you caught a billionaire," Marcus had snarled, blocking her path to the car. "You have no idea what kind of man Alexander Blackwood really is. He destroys people like me for sport, and when he gets bored with you, he'll destroy you too." Elena had managed to escape when building security arrived, but the encounter had left her shaken. Alexander had been furious when he learned what had happened, and within hours, Marcus Chin had been arrested on charges of stalking and criminal harassment. But the damage had been done. Elena's sense of safety had been shattered, and she had become increasingly paranoid about her security. Alexander had tried to reassure her, increasing her protection detail and moving her into his penthouse apartment for her safety. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was still in danger. That was when she had made the decision that now haunted her on her wedding day. Elena had started carrying protection with her everywhere she went. Not a gun, which would have been too obvious and too dangerous in her line of work, but something more discreet and equally effective. She had researched her options carefully, consulting with security experts and self-defense instructors before making her choice. The weapon she had chosen was a set of specially designed ceramic shards, each one sharpened to a razor-like edge and small enough to be concealed almost anywhere. They were undetectable by metal detectors and could cause serious damage if used correctly. Elena had practiced with them for hours, learning how to deploy them quickly and effectively if she was ever attacked again. She had hidden the shards in various locations around her apartment and office, always keeping at least one set within easy reach. It had given her a sense of control and safety that she hadn't felt since the stalking began. But now, on her wedding day, Elena realized she had made a terrible mistake. The ceramic shards were currently hidden in a secret compartment she had created in the soles of her wedding shoes. She had carefully hollowed out a space in each heel, creating a hiding place that would allow her to carry protection even on the most formal occasions. It had seemed like a reasonable precaution at the time, but now she was filled with regret. What if Alexander discovered them? What if someone at the wedding noticed something unusual about her shoes? What if airport security found them during their honeymoon trip to Europe? Elena's hands shook as she picked up the wedding shoes, feeling the slight weight of the concealed shards. She had been planning to remove them before the ceremony, but there hadn't been an opportunity to do so safely. Too many people were coming and going from the suite, and she couldn't risk someone seeing her tampering with her shoes. She would have to wear them to the wedding and find a way to dispose of the shards during the reception. A knock at the door interrupted her troubled thoughts. "Elena, darling, may I come in?" It was Alexander's mother, Victoria Blackwood, a woman who had never quite approved of her son's choice in wives. Victoria was old money aristocracy, the kind of woman who traced her lineage back to the Mayflower and considered Elena's middle-class background to be a significant social deficiency. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," Elena called out, quickly slipping on the shoes and adjusting her dress. Victoria entered the room with her usual regal bearing, dressed in an elegant navy blue ensemble that probably cost more than Elena's parents earned in a year. She was followed by the wedding coordinator, a nervous young woman who had been managing the event details for months. "You look lovely, dear," Victoria said, though her tone suggested she was merely being polite. I wanted to give you something before the ceremony begins. She held out a small velvet box, inside which nestled a pair of diamond earrings that sparkled like captured starlight. These belonged to Alexander's great-grandmother. They've been worn by every Blackwood bride for the past century. Elena accepted the earrings with trembling hands, touched despite Victoria's cool demeanor. Thank you so much. I'm honored to wear them. They're quite valuable, Victoria said pointedly. The diamonds are from the original mines in South Africa, and the setting is platinum. I trust you'll take good care of them. I will, Elena promised, carefully replacing her simple pearl earrings with the family heirlooms. Victoria studied Elena's appearance with a critical eye. The dress is quite beautiful, very appropriate for a church wedding. And those shoes are lovely as well. Designer. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Yes, they're custom-made. How wonderful, Victoria said, though she sounded anything but enthusiastic. Well, I should let you finish your preparations. The ceremony begins in 2 hours, and there's still so much to arrange. After Victoria left, Elena collapsed into a nearby chair, her legs weak with relief. She had been terrified that Alexander's mother would somehow sense that something was wrong with her shoes. The woman had an uncanny ability to detect deception, and Elena had always felt like she was under a microscope whenever Victoria was around. Sophia returned to the room carrying Elena's bouquet, a stunning arrangement of white roses and baby's breath tied with ivory silk ribbons. The photographer wants to take some pictures of you getting ready. Are you ready for that? Elena nodded, though she felt anything but ready. The next few hours would be the most challenging of her life, and she had to maintain her composure while hiding a dangerous secret from the man she was about to marry. The photographer, a cheerful woman named Isabel, began positioning Elena for the pre-wedding shots. These will be beautiful keepsakes, she said, adjusting the lighting equipment. Let's start with some shots of you holding the bouquet. As Isabel snapped photos, Elena tried to focus on looking happy and radiant. She thought about all the reasons she loved Alexander, all the wonderful moments they had shared over the past 18 months. Their first kiss under the stars at his estate, the way he held her when she had nightmares about Marcus Chun, the morning he had proposed on the beach in Nantucket. Alexander had planned the proposal perfectly. They had been walking along the shore at sunset, talking about their future together, when he had suddenly dropped to one knee in the sand. The ring he had presented was breathtaking, a 5-carat diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the dying light of the sun. Elena Martinez, he had said, his voice thick with emotion. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've made me want to be a better man, a man worthy of your love. Will you marry me? She had said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It had been the happiest moment of her life, and she had felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Now, 6 months later, that happiness was overshadowed by the weight of her secret. Elena knew she should tell Alexander about the ceramic shards, should explain why she had felt the need to carry such protection. But she was terrified of how he might react. Would he be angry that she had hidden something so important from him? Would he worry that she didn't trust his ability to protect her? Would he call off the wedding if he discovered what she was carrying in her shoes? The photography session continued for another hour, with Isabel capturing every detail of Elena's wedding day preparations. The silk dress, the diamond tiara, the family earrings, even the custom shoes that held such a dangerous secret. When the session finally ended, Elena was exhausted from maintaining her smile and pretending to be the carefree bride everyone expected her to be. Sophia helped her touch up her makeup and adjust her veil one final time before the ceremony. You're going to be such a beautiful bride, Sophia said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Alexander is going to cry when he sees you walking down that aisle. Elena hoped that was the only reason Alexander would have to cry on their wedding day. The limousine ride to the church passed in a blur of Manhattan traffic and nervous excitement. Elena sat beside her father, Carlos Martinez, who looked handsome and proud in his rented tuxedo. Her mother, Maria, had ridden ahead with the wedding party, leaving father and daughter to share these precious final moments before Elena's life changed forever. Mija, Carlos said softly, using the affectionate Spanish term he had called her since childhood. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind if you have any doubts. Elena squeezed her father's weathered hand. I'm sure, Papa. I love Alexander, and he loves me. We're going to have a wonderful life together. Carlos studied his daughter's face with the careful attention of a man who had spent 30 years reading her moods and emotions. You seem nervous. More nervous than a bride should be on her wedding day. I'm just overwhelmed by everything, Elena replied, which was partially true. The media attention, the society people, all the expectations. It's a lot to handle. You've always been strong, Elena, her father said proudly. Stronger than your mother, and I ever imagined you could be. Whatever challenges you face as Alexander's wife, I know you'll handle them with grace and intelligence. If only he knew what she was really facing, Elena thought. If only he knew about the ceramic shards hidden in her shoes, and the terror that had driven her to such desperate measures. The limousine pulled up outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, where hundreds of guests and media representatives were waiting for the wedding of the year. Elena could see the photographers and television crews positioned behind barriers, their cameras ready to capture every moment of her arrival. Ready, Mija? Carlos asked, offering his arm. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the slight pressure of the hidden shards against her feet. I'm ready, Papa. The massive oak doors of St. Patrick's Cathedral opened to reveal a sea of faces turned expectantly toward Elena. The cathedral's soaring Gothic arches and stained glass windows created a breathtaking backdrop for what the society pages were calling the wedding of the decade. Over 800 guests had gathered to witness the union of Alexander Blackwood and Elena Martinez, including celebrities, politicians, business leaders, and members of international royal families. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she saw Alexander waiting for her at the altar. He looked devastatingly handsome in his custom-tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, and his blue eyes bright with emotion. Standing beside him were his groomsmen, including his younger brother James and his best friend from Harvard, all of them looking like they had stepped out of a magazine spread. The wedding march began, played by a full orchestra that Alexander had flown in from Vienna specifically for the ceremony. Elena stepped forward on her father's arm, her ivory silk train flowing behind her like liquid moonlight. With each step down the aisle, she could feel the weight of the ceramic shards in her shoes, a constant reminder of the dangerous secret she was carrying on what should have been the most joyful day of her life. The cathedral was decorated with thousands of white roses and cascading arrangements of baby's breath, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Candles flickered in every alcove, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls and creating an atmosphere of timeless romance. Elena had dreamed of a wedding like this since she was a little girl, but now she could barely appreciate the beauty around her. As they walked slowly down the aisle, Elena caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd. Her college friends from Stanford, colleagues from Meridian Investment Group, neighbors from her childhood in Queens who looked slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the occasion. She saw Alexander's business associates, their wives dripping with diamonds, and designer gowns that cost more than most people's annual salaries. In the front row sat both families, a study in contrast that perfectly illustrated the gulf between their backgrounds. Elena's relatives looked proud, but somewhat out of place in the opulent setting, while the Blackwood family exuded the confidence that came with generations of wealth and privilege. Victoria Blackwood sat ramrod straight, her expression carefully neutral as she watched her son's bride approach the altar. When they reached the front of the cathedral, Carlos Martinez lifted Elena's veil and kissed her cheek tenderly. "Be happy, Mija," he whispered, before placing her hand in Alexander's and stepping back to join his wife in the first pew. Alexander's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he took Elena's hands in his. "You're beautiful," he murmured, so softly that only she could hear him over the music. Elena forced a smile, trying to push aside her anxiety about the hidden weapons in her shoes. "I love you," she whispered back, and meant it despite everything that was complicating this moment. The officiant, Archbishop Morrison, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. He was an elderly man with a warm smile who had known the Blackwood family for decades and had baptized both Alexander and James when they were infants. His presence added an air of tradition and solemnity to the proceedings. "Dearly beloved," The archbishop began, his voice carrying easily through the cathedral's excellent acoustics. We are gathered here today in the sight of God, and these witnesses to join Alexander Charles Blackwood and Elena Maria Martinez in the holy bonds of matrimony. Elena tried to focus on the beautiful words of the traditional ceremony, but her attention kept drifting to the sensation of the ceramic shards against her feet. She had positioned them carefully in the hollowed-out heels of her shoes, but she was terrified that someone might notice something unusual about her gait or the way she was standing. The archbishop continued with the opening remarks, speaking about the sanctity of marriage and the commitment that Alexander and Elena were making to each other. Elena had heard these words during wedding rehearsal, but they seemed to take on new meaning now that she was standing at the altar with her secret weighing heavily on her mind. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, Archbishop Morrison said, but with careful consideration and complete honesty between the parties involved. The word honesty hit Elena like a physical blow. Here she was, promising to love and honor Alexander for the rest of her life, while hiding something that could potentially put both of them in danger. She felt like a fraud standing there in her beautiful dress, accepting the admiration and well wishes of their guests while concealing such a significant deception. The archbishop asked if anyone present knew of any reason why Alexander and Elena should not be married, and Elena's heart nearly stopped. For a terrifying moment, she imagined Marcus Chun rising from somewhere in the cathedral to object to the wedding, revealing her secret to the assembled crowd. But the traditional question passed without incident, and the ceremony continued. When it came time for the exchange of vows, Alexander spoke first. His voice was strong and clear as he promised to love Elena through all the challenges and joys that life might bring them. He spoke of her intelligence, her compassion, her strength in the face of adversity, and her ability to make him want to be a better man. "You came into my life like a ray of sunlight," Alexander said, his eyes locked on hers, "and changed everything I thought I knew about love and happiness. I promise to protect you, to support your dreams, and to stand by your side no matter what difficulties we may face. You are my heart, my soul, my everything, and I will love you until the day I die." Elena's eyes filled with tears at the sincerity in his voice. She knew that Alexander meant every word, and that knowledge made her secret feel even more like a betrayal. When it was her turn to speak, she had to clear her throat several times before she could find her voice. "Alexander," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "you've shown me a love I never thought possible. You've given me strength when I was afraid, hope when I was discouraged, and joy beyond measure. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to love you with everything I have for the rest of my life." She wanted to say more, to somehow apologize for the deception she was perpetrating, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she let her love for him shine through her eyes, hoping that would be enough to bridge the gap created by her secret. The ring ceremony was particularly meaningful, as Alexander slipped the platinum wedding band onto Elena's finger to rest beside her engagement ring. The band was engraved with a line from Pablo Neruda's poetry that had special significance for them. "Love is so short, forgetting is so long." Elena had chosen the inscription herself during one of their romantic evenings reading poetry together. When Elena placed Alexander's wedding ring on his finger, she noticed that his hands were slightly shaking. He was just as nervous and emotional as she was, though for very different reasons. For him, this was the culmination of a beautiful love story. For her, it was a moment of profound internal conflict. The archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, and Alexander kissed Elena with such tenderness and passion that the entire cathedral erupted in applause. For that brief moment, Elena forgot about the ceramic shards, forgot about her fears and secrets, and lost herself in the joy of becoming Alexander's wife. As they walked back down the aisle together as Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, Elena felt a complex mixture of emotions. She was genuinely happy to be married to the man she loved, but the weight of her deception cast a shadow over what should have been pure bliss. The guests threw rose petals and rice as they passed, and Elena smiled and waved while internally struggling with her conscience. The receiving line outside the cathedral was a blur of congratulations and well wishes. Elena met dozens of people she had never seen before, all eager to shake hands with the new Mrs. Blackwood and offer their best wishes for her marriage. Many of the guests made comments about her shoes, complimenting their elegant design and perfect match to her dress. "Those shoes are absolutely exquisite," gushed Mrs. Pemberton, the wife of a prominent businessman. "They look like they were made specifically for that dress." "They were custom designed," Elena replied, her heart pounding. "A very talented craftsman in Italy created them just for today." It wasn't entirely a lie, Elena told herself. The shoes had been custom-made, though she had personally modified them to include the hidden compartments. The Italian craftsman who had created the original design would probably be horrified to know what his beautiful creation was now concealing. Alexander's business partner, Jonathan Reeves, approached with his wife during the receiving line. "Congratulations, Alexander," he said, pumping Alexander's hand enthusiastically. "You found yourself a remarkable woman." "Thank you, Jonathan," Alexander replied, his arm tightening around Elena's waist. "I'm the luckiest man alive." "And, Elena," Jonathan continued, turning to her with a warm smile, "welcome to the family business. I hope you're prepared for the adventure of being married to this workaholic." Elena laughed, though it sounded slightly forced to her own ears. "I think I can handle him," she said, looking up at her new husband with genuine affection despite her inner turmoil. The conversation continued for several more minutes, during which Elena found herself growing increasingly uncomfortable. Not because of anything Jonathan said, but because she noticed that he kept glancing down at her feet. At first she thought she was being paranoid, but the pattern was too obvious to ignore. When Jonathan and his wife moved on, Elena whispered to Alexander, "Did you notice how Mr. Reeves kept looking at my shoes?" Alexander glanced down at her feet, then back at her face with a puzzled expression. "I didn't notice anything unusual." "Why? Is something wrong with them?" No, Elena said quickly. "I just thought it was odd behavior for a business meeting." "Jonathan has always been a bit eccentric," Alexander replied with a shrug. "Don't worry about it. He's harmless." But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan Reeves had noticed something unusual about her shoes. The way he had studied them suggested more than casual interest in fashion. She began to wonder if the modifications she had made to conceal the ceramic shards were more obvious than she had thought. The photographer requested several formal portraits of the newlyweds on the cathedral steps before they left for the reception. Elena tried to maintain her composure and smile naturally, but she was becoming increasingly anxious about her secret. Every time someone looked in her direction, she worried they might somehow detect what she was hiding. During one of the photo sessions, Elena's heel caught slightly on the stone steps, causing her to stumble momentarily. Alexander caught her arm to steady her, but not before she had felt one of the ceramic shards shift slightly in its hiding place. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked with concern. "These old cathedral steps can be treacherous in formal shoes." "I'm fine," Elena assured him, though her heart was racing. "Just lost my balance for a moment." The wedding coordinator, who had been hovering nearby to ensure everything went smoothly, approached with a worried expression. "Mrs. Blackwood, would you like to sit down for a moment? We can bring you a chair." "That's not necessary," Elena replied, forcing a bright smile. "I'm perfectly fine. Let's continue with the photos." But she wasn't fine. The incident with the shifting shard had rattled her more than she cared to admit. What if one of the ceramic pieces became dislodged during the reception? What if someone noticed her acting strangely when she walked or danced? The limousine ride to the Plaza Hotel, where the reception was being held, gave Elena a few minutes to collect herself and try to calm her nerves. Alexander sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her knee as he scrolled through congratulatory messages on his phone. "Look at this," he said, showing her a text from his college roommate who couldn't attend the wedding. "He says we made the front page of 3 different society magazines before we even finished the ceremony." Elena glanced at the phone screen, seeing a photo of herself and Alexander kissing at the altar. She looked beautiful and happy in the image, with no hint of the anxiety that had been consuming her throughout the day. "The power of professional photography," she said with a weak smile. "You really do look stunning." Alexander said, setting his phone aside and taking her hand. I still can't believe you're my wife. I can't believe it either, Elena replied. And it was true for reasons he couldn't possibly understand. Alexander's expression became more serious as he studied her face. Elena, you seem a bit nervous today. More than usual wedding day jitters. Is everything all right? Elena's heart skipped a beat. Alexander knew her well enough to detect her anxiety, even when she thought she was hiding it successfully. She had to be more careful, or he would start asking questions she wasn't prepared to answer. I'm just overwhelmed by all the attention, she said, which was partially true. The cameras, the crowds, all those important people watching our every move. I keep worrying I'm going to do something embarrassing. Alexander lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. You're perfect, he said softly. Everyone can see how beautiful and gracious you are. You have nothing to worry about. If only that were true, Elena thought. If only her biggest concern was social embarrassment instead of the weapons hidden in her shoes. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland for their reception. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkling light over tables decorated with white roses and silver accents. The ceiling was draped with flowing white fabric that created an intimate atmosphere despite the room's impressive size. An orchestra played soft classical music as guests mingled and enjoyed cocktails before dinner was served. Elena and Alexander made their entrance to thunderous applause, and she was grateful for Alexander's steady hand on her back as they walked to the head table. The ceramic shards seemed to grow heavier with each step, and she found herself walking more carefully than usual to avoid any further shifting. The first dance was At Last by Etta James, a song that had special meaning for them since it had been playing during their first kiss at the Hamptons Charity Gala. As Alexander held her close and they swayed to the music, Elena tried to focus on the romance of the moment and forget about her secret. I love this song, Alexander murmured in her ear as they danced. It reminds me of the night I knew I was going to marry you. When did you know? Elena asked, genuinely curious despite her distracted state. About 30 seconds after I met you, Alexander replied with a smile. You looked so beautiful and fierce when you got angry at my comment about not belonging. I knew right then that you were going to change my life. Elena's eyes filled with tears at his words. She loved this man more than she had ever loved anyone, which made her deception feel even more wrong. She wanted to tell him everything, to explain why she had felt compelled to carry protection, to ask for his understanding and forgiveness. But this was their wedding day, in front of 800 guests and countless photographers. This wasn't the time or place for such revelations. As the evening progressed, Elena began to notice more people paying attention to her shoes. During the father-daughter dance with Carlos, her father commented on how beautiful they were. During the mother-son dance between Alexander and Victoria, she caught Victoria glancing at her feet several times. The most unsettling moment came when Victoria approached Elena during a break between courses at dinner. Alexander had stepped away to greet some business associates, leaving Elena alone at the head table for a few minutes. Elena, dear, Victoria said, settling into Alexander's empty chair. I wanted to tell you how lovely you look tonight. That dress is absolutely perfect on you. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood, Elena replied, though she noticed that Victoria's eyes weren't focused on the dress. And those shoes, Victoria continued, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge, they're quite unique. The heel design is very interesting, almost architectural in its complexity. Elena's blood ran cold. Victoria Blackwood was an intelligent, perceptive woman who had spent decades navigating high society and its secrets. If anyone was going to notice that something was unusual about Elena's shoes, it would be her new mother-in-law. Thank you, Elena managed to say. They were designed to complement the dress specifically. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, I can see that. Very thoughtful design work. I imagine they required quite a bit of modification to achieve such a perfect fit. The word modification hung in the air between them like an accusation. Elena wasn't sure if Victoria actually suspected something or if she was simply making conversation, but the exchange left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. All custom shoes require some adjustment, Elena replied carefully. That's the nature of bespoke craftsmanship. Indeed, Victoria said, rising from her chair as Alexander returned to the table. Well, I should let you get back to enjoying your special day. Congratulations again on your marriage. As Victoria glided away, Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the ballroom. She had the distinct feeling that her mother-in-law suspected something was not quite right, even if she didn't know exactly what it was. The rest of the reception passed in a haze of congratulations, toasts, and carefully orchestrated events. Elena smiled and laughed and played the role of the happy bride while internally counting down the minutes until she could escape to somewhere private and deal with her increasingly problematic secret. During the cake-cutting ceremony, she noticed Jonathan Rees watching her again, his expression thoughtful and slightly puzzled. When she caught him staring, he smiled and raised his champagne glass in a toast. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that he was analyzing her behavior for some reason. The final straw came during the bouquet toss. Elena had gathered all the unmarried women behind her, ready to throw her bouquet over her shoulder in the traditional manner. As she drew her arm back to make the throw, she felt one of the ceramic shards shift again in her heel, this time more dramatically than before. The sensation was so startling that she nearly lost her balance, catching herself just before she stumbled. The bouquet flew awkwardly to one side, landing at the feet of a surprised bridesmaid rather than sailing gracefully through the air as planned. "Are you all right, darling?" Alexander asked, immediately at her side with concern. "Just slipped a bit," Elena said, her voice higher than normal. "These shoes are beautiful, but not very practical for athletic activities." Alexander laughed along with the guests, but Elena caught him glancing down at her feet with a slightly puzzled expression. She realized that her behavior throughout the evening had probably seemed strange to him, even if he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. As the reception finally wound down and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon suite, Elena knew she was running out of time. She had to find a way to dispose of the ceramic shards before Alexander discovered them, but she wasn't sure how she was going to manage it without arousing even more suspicion. The last thing she wanted was for her new husband to discover on their the presidential suite at the Plaza Hotel was a masterpiece of luxury and elegance, decorated with fresh flowers and scattered rose petals that the hotel staff had arranged as a special wedding night surprise. Champagne chilled in an ice bucket on the marble-top table, and soft jazz music played from hidden speakers throughout the spacious rooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, where the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Elena stood in the middle of the opulent living area, still wearing her wedding dress and the problematic shoes that had caused her so much anxiety throughout the day. Alexander was in the bedroom, hanging up his tuxedo jacket and talking on the phone with his assistant about some urgent business matter that couldn't wait until after their honeymoon. This was her chance, Elena realized. While Alexander was distracted, she could finally dispose of the ceramic shards that had been weighing on her mind and her conscience all day. She just needed a few minutes alone to remove them from her shoes and find a safe way to get rid of them permanently. Elena kicked off the ivory pumps and quickly examined them, running her fingers along the modified heels where she had hidden the weapons. The compartments she had created were small and cleverly concealed, invisible to casual observation, but accessible if you knew exactly where to look. She had designed them herself after extensive research into concealment techniques, never imagining that she would come to regret their existence so deeply. Working quickly and quietly, Elena pressed the hidden catch that opened the first compartment. The ceramic shard slipped out into her palm, its razor-sharp edge catching the light from the chandelier above. It was smaller than a credit card, but potentially lethal in the right circumstances. She had practiced with similar pieces during her self-defense training, learning how to use them effectively against an attacker. The sound of Alexander's voice carried from the bedroom as he continued his phone conversation. "No, I don't want to deal with the Singapore contract until I get back from Europe. Tell them we'll review their proposal when I return to the office next month." Elena opened the second compartment and retrieved the matching shard from her other shoe. Now she held both weapons in her hands, feeling their slight weight and remembering the fear that had driven her to acquire them in the first place. Marcus Chen's threats had seemed so real and immediate at the time. The stalking, The break-ins, the confrontation in the parking garage, all of it had convinced her that she needed to take extreme measures to protect herself. But now, standing in her wedding dress in the most expensive hotel suite in Manhattan, Elena realized how far she had strayed from the person she used to be. The shy, honest girl from Queens who had worked her way through Stanford and built a successful career through hard work and integrity would never have conceived of carrying concealed weapons to her own wedding. The bathroom seemed like the most logical place to dispose of the shards. Elena could wrap them in tissue and flush them down the toilet, or perhaps break them into smaller pieces and wash them down the sink. She just needed to be quick about it before Alexander finished his call and came looking for her. Elena was halfway to the bathroom when she heard Alexander's voice much closer than expected. "Elena? Where did you go, darling?" Her heart stopped. He had finished his call sooner than she had anticipated, and now he was walking toward the living area where she stood frozen with the ceramic shards still in her hands. There was no time to reach the bathroom, no time to hide the evidence of her deception. In a moment of panic, Elena shoved the ceramic pieces into the nearest available hiding spot, a crystal vase filled with white roses that sat on a side table near the windows. The shards clinked softly against the glass as they sank below the flower stems, invisible but not gone. "There you are," Alexander said, emerging from the bedroom with his bow tie undone and his shirt sleeves rolled up. "I was wondering if you had disappeared on me." "I was just admiring the view," Elena said, gesturing toward the windows while simultaneously stepping away from the vase. "The city looks beautiful from up here." Alexander joined her at the window, slipping his arms around her waist from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Not as beautiful as my wife," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the curve of her neck. Elena leaned back against his chest, trying to enjoy the romantic moment despite the anxiety gnawing at her. The ceramic shards were only a few feet away, hidden among the roses but still very much present in the room. She had to find a way to retrieve and dispose of them properly before they caused any more problems. "Are you ready to get out of that dress?" Alexander asked, his hands moving to the tiny buttons that ran down Elena's back. "As beautiful as you look in it. I imagine it's not very comfortable after wearing it all day." "Actually," Elena said quickly, stepping away from his embrace, "I'd like to take a shower first. It's been such a long day, and I want to freshen up before we continue celebrating." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly at her sudden formality, but he smiled and nodded understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll order some dessert from room service while you're getting ready." Elena gathered her nightgown and robe from the suitcase that the hotel staff had unpacked earlier, then headed for the bathroom. Once inside with the door closed, she leaned against the marble countertop and tried to calm her racing heart. She needed to come up with a plan to retrieve the ceramic shards from the vase without arousing Alexander's suspicion. The bathroom was as luxurious as the rest of the suite, with a marble-lined shower that could easily accommodate 2 people and a soaking tub that overlooked Central Park. Under normal circumstances, Elena would have been thrilled to spend her wedding night in such an incredible setting. But nothing about this situation felt normal anymore. Elena started the shower and began the process of removing her wedding dress, a complicated procedure that required unfastening dozens of tiny buttons and carefully navigating the layers of silk and lace. As the warm water filled the bathroom with steam, she thought about how to handle the situation with the hidden weapons. She could wait until Alexander fell asleep and then retrieve the shards under cover of darkness. But that plan had obvious risks. What if he woke up while she was tampering with the flower arrangement? How would she explain her behavior? Alternatively, she could confess everything to Alexander right now and hope that he would understand why she had felt compelled to take such drastic security measures. But the thought of seeing disappointment and anger in his eyes on their wedding night was almost unbearable. The shower helped clear Elena's mind, if not her conscience. The hot water and fragrant soap washed away the physical residue of the long day, but couldn't cleanse her of the emotional burden she was carrying. As she stood under the rainfall showerhead, Elena made a decision that she hoped she wouldn't regret. She would tell Alexander everything. Her husband deserved the truth, regardless of how painful it might be for both of them. Elena had built their relationship on honesty and trust, and she couldn't start their marriage with such a significant deception hanging between them. If Alexander truly loved her the way he claimed, he would find a way to understand and forgive her actions. Elena emerged from the bathroom wearing a silk nightgown in pale blue, her hair still damp from the shower and her skin flushed from the warm water. She found Alexander sitting on the living room sofa with a bottle of champagne and a plate of chocolate-covered strawberries from room service. "You look beautiful," he said, rising to greet her with a gentle kiss. "Much more relaxed than you seemed earlier." "Alexander," Elena began, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something important that I should have mentioned before now." Alexander's expression grew serious as he detected the gravity in her tone. "What is it, Elena? You're starting to worry me." Elena took a deep breath and gestured toward the vase of roses near the window. "There's something hidden in that flower arrangement. Something that belongs to me. Something I put there a few minutes ago." Alexander followed her gaze to the innocent-looking vase, confusion evident in his features. "I don't understand. What could you have hidden in our wedding flowers?" "Ceramic shards," Elena said quietly. "Weapons. I've been carrying them with me for months, ever since the stalking incident with Marcus Chun got so bad. I had them hidden in my wedding shoes throughout the entire ceremony." The silence that followed Elena's confession seemed to stretch for an eternity. Alexander stared at her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been hurt. "Weapons," he repeated slowly, as if he couldn't quite process what she had said. "You were carrying weapons at our wedding?" "Small ceramic pieces," Elena explained, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. "They're designed to be undetectable by metal detectors. I started carrying them after Marcus cornered me in the parking garage. I was so scared, Alexander. I felt like I needed some way to protect myself if something like that happened again." Alexander walked over to the vase and carefully moved aside the rose stems, revealing the ceramic shards nestled among the flower roots. He lifted one piece out of the water, holding it up to examine its razor-sharp edge in the lamplight. "Jesus, Elena," he breathed. "This could seriously hurt someone. You could have injured yourself just carrying it around." "I know," Elena said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I know it was dangerous and probably stupid, but I was so frightened after everything that happened. You increased my security detail, you moved me into your apartment, but I still felt vulnerable. I needed something that was completely under my control." Alexander set the ceramic shard down on the coffee table and turned to face his new wife. "Why didn't you tell me about this? We're supposed to be partners, Elena. We're supposed to trust each other with everything." "I was afraid," Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid you would think I didn't trust you to protect me. Afraid you would be angry or disappointed. Afraid you might even call off the wedding if you knew what I was carrying." "Call off the wedding?" Alexander's voice rose slightly. "Elena, I love you more than anything in this world. Nothing could make me want to call off our wedding. But hiding something this significant from me, that's what's really disappointing." Elena began to cry in earnest now, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling under the weight of her guilt and fear. "I'm so sorry, Alexander. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I never found the right moment. And then, it was our wedding day, and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of them without someone noticing." Alexander stood in the middle of the elegant suite, running his hands through his dark hair as he processed this unexpected revelation. Elena could see him struggling to understand not just what she had done, but why she had felt it necessary to deceive him about something so important. "Elena," he said finally, his voice gentler than before, "I need you to help me understand something. Do you really feel that unsafe, even now? Even after Marcus Chun was arrested and charged? Even with all the security measures we put in place?" Elena wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to gather her thoughts enough to give him a coherent answer. "It's not rational," she admitted. "I know that logically, the threat is minimal now. But, emotionally, I can't seem to let go of the fear. Every time I walk alone, every time I hear footsteps behind me, every time I'm in an unfamiliar place, I remember how helpless I felt when Marcus cornered me." Alexander's expression softened as he began to understand the psychological impact that the stalking had had on his wife. "Why didn't you tell me you were still struggling with that fear?" We could have gotten you counseling, therapy, whatever you needed to feel safe again. Because I thought I could handle it on my own, Elena replied. I thought if I just took some self-defense classes and had a backup plan for protection, the fear would go away eventually. I didn't want to be a burden or seem weak. Weak? Alexander crossed the room in 2 quick strides and gathered Elena into his arms. Elena, you're one of the strongest people I know. What you went through with Marcus would have traumatized anyone. There's nothing weak about needing help to recover from that. Elena buried her face against Alexander's chest, feeling some of the tension leave her body as he held her close. I'm so sorry I lied to you. I'm so sorry I brought weapons to our wedding. I know how crazy it must seem. Alexander stroked her damp hair gently, his anger giving way to concern and compassion. It doesn't seem crazy, Elena. It seems like the actions of someone who was badly frightened and didn't know where else to turn for help. I just wish you had trusted me enough to tell me what you were going through. I do trust you, Elena said fiercely, pulling back to look at his face. I trust you completely. This wasn't about not trusting you. It was about not trusting myself to survive if something went wrong. Alexander cupped Elena's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice firm but loving. Nothing is going to happen to you. I will not let anyone hurt you ever again. But, more than that, we're going to get you the help you need to feel safe in your own life again. You're not angry? Elena asked hesitantly. I'm disappointed that you felt you couldn't tell me, Alexander replied honestly. And I'm concerned about what you've been going through emotionally these past months. But angry? No, Elena. I'm not angry with you for being afraid. Elena felt a rush of relief so intense it made her knees weak. She had been prepared for Alexander's anger, his disappointment, even the possibility that he might question their marriage. But his understanding and compassion were more than she had dared to hope for. Alexander picked up the ceramic shard from the coffee table, holding it carefully by its edges. Where did you get these? They look professionally made. There's a man in Chinatown who specializes in custom self-defense tools, Elena explained. I found him through an online forum for women's safety. He made them specifically to my measurements and requirements. And you've been carrying them everywhere. Elena nodded. Hidden in different places depending on where I was going. Sewn into jacket linings, taped under desk drawers, concealed in purse compartments. I always made sure I had at least one set within reach. Alexander shook his head in amazement. Elena, you've essentially been living like an undercover operative for the past 6 months. That's no way to live. I know, Elena agreed. I know it's not healthy or sustainable. I just didn't know how else to cope with the fear. Alexander retrieved the second ceramic shard from the vase and placed both pieces on the coffee table where they could examine them together. These are actually quite sophisticated, he observed. Lightweight, sharp, designed to be concealed. This wasn't a casual purchase. I researched extensively before I made the decision, Elena admitted. I wanted something that would be effective, but also safe for me to carry. I practiced with them for weeks before I felt comfortable enough to actually take them anywhere. Practiced how? There's a martial arts studio in Brooklyn that teaches knife defense and improvised weapons techniques. I told the instructor I was interested in learning for fitness and confidence, which was technically true. Alexander sat down on the sofa and pulled Elena down beside him, keeping his arm around her shoulders. I'm starting to understand just how much this experience affected you, he said. You essentially restructured your entire life around the fear of being attacked again. I tried to be discreet about it, Elena said. I didn't want anyone to know how paranoid I had become. I was afraid people would think I was overreacting or being dramatic. Overreacting. Alexander's voice carried a note of disbelief. Elena, you were stalked for months by someone who explicitly threatened to harm you. You were cornered and intimidated in what should have been a safe space. There's no such thing as overreacting to that kind of trauma. Elena leaned against Alexander's shoulder, feeling emotionally exhausted but also strangely relieved. For months, she had carried this secret alone, convinced that no one would understand her actions or motivations. Having it finally, out in the open, having Alexander's support instead of his condemnation, felt like a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. What happens now? She asked quietly. What do we do with all of this? Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering their options. First, we're going to dispose of these weapons safely. Then, when we get back from our honeymoon, we're going to find you a therapist who specializes in trauma recovery. And we're going to have a serious conversation about security measures that will help you feel safe without requiring you to arm yourself. You make it sound so reasonable and manageable, Elena said with a weak smile. I've been carrying this secret around like it was the end of the world. Secrets have a way of growing larger in the dark, Alexander replied wisely. Most problems seem more manageable once you bring them into the light and share them with someone who cares about you. Elena lifted her head to look at her husband's face. I love you so much, Alexander. I'm sorry I didn't trust our relationship enough to tell you what I was going through. I love you too, Alexander replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. And I'm sorry that I didn't recognize how much you were still struggling with the aftermath of the stalking. I should have been more attentive to what you needed. They sat together in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the lights of the city twinkle beyond their windows. Elena felt a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced in months. The secret was out, the weapons were no longer her responsibility alone, and Alexander was still here beside her, still committed to their marriage and their future together. So, Alexander said eventually, a hint of humor returning to his voice, our wedding night story is definitely going to be unique. Not many couples can say they spent their first evening as husband and wife discussing concealed weapons disposal. Elena laughed despite herself. Just promise me this won't become family legend. I don't think I could handle Victoria knowing about this. Alexander's expression grew slightly more serious. Actually, I think my mother might have already suspected something was unusual. She mentioned to me during the reception that she thought your shoes were architecturally interesting. Elena's eyes widened. Oh God, do you think she knew? I doubt she knew specifics, but Victoria has excellent instincts about people and situations. She might have sensed that something was different about your behavior today. What do I say if she asks me about it directly? Alexander considered this question carefully. We tell her the truth, if it comes to that. Not immediately, and not in great detail, but the basic facts. You were dealing with trauma from the stalking incident. You took some unusual precautions to feel safe, and now we're addressing the situation properly. Elena nodded, feeling somewhat relieved that they had a plan for potential future complications. I never thought about how many people this might affect besides just us. Any significant event ripples outward, Alexander said. But the important thing is that we're handling it together now. No more secrets, no more carrying burdens alone. No more secrets, Elena agreed, and meant it completely. Alexander stood up and carefully gathered the ceramic shards from the coffee table. Let me take care of disposing these safely. We don't want hotel housekeeping to accidentally discover them tomorrow morning. As Elena watched her husband wrap the weapons carefully in a hotel towel, she felt the last vestiges of her fear and guilt beginning to fade. The secret that had haunted her throughout their engagement and wedding day was finally resolved, and Alexander's love and support had proven stronger than her worst fears. Tomorrow they would begin their honeymoon in Paris, then travel through Europe for 3 weeks of romance and relaxation. When they returned, they would start the process of healing from the trauma that had driven Elena to such desperate measures. But tonight, finally, Elena could simply be a new bride celebrating her marriage to the man she loved more than anything in the world. Wedding night that his bride had been carrying concealed weapons throughout their entire ceremony. As they walked up the cathedral steps together, Elena tried to focus on the moment and push aside her fears about the secret she was carrying. In a few minutes, she would be walking down the aisle toward the man she loved, surrounded by family and friends who had come to celebrate their union. She just had to make it through the ceremony without anyone discovering what she was hiding in her wedding shoes.